Hi there, this is Max from Iridescent Color, and in today's video I want to look at split tone and compare the options that we get with the Film Look Creator in Resolve 19 with the options that you get with my new Split Tone Pro bundle, and have a general talk about why you might want to choose DCTLs over the options that you have here in the Film Look Creator. So let's get started by just having a look at what the Film Look Creator offers us. And I've turned everything else off so that we just get the effect of the split tone. And if I increase the amount, you can see that the effect that we're getting is exactly what we're expecting. We get a warm push in the highlights and a cool push in the shadows, and we increase the overall color, contrast, and the filmic character. But what I'm noticing here straight away is that by the time that I get the strong cool push that I want in the shadows, I feel like I get too much of a highlight push. And in this Film Look Creator, there's really nothing that we can do about that because the strength of the shadow and the highlight push are locked. So if we want to dial back the amount of warm push that we get in the highlights, we have to dial back the entire look. And this is the first weakness with this Film Look Creator that we can solve with my DCTL. If I increase the strength here, I can go however far I want with the shadows, and then just say, okay, this is a bit too much in the highlights. And if I activate the curve, you can see if I move the balance to the left, we've reduced the strength of the highlight push. And if I move it to the right, we've reduced the strength of the shadow push. And so I can get exactly the combination of highlight and shadow split that I want to achieve. And while we're seeing this curve, there's another thing that I want to point out to you about the Film Look Creator, and it's easier to see when we look at a grayscale ramp. And so I'm going to activate my scopes here, my waveform, and the Film Look Creator. And what you can see about this split tone scheme here is that it gets stronger the closer we get to white. And the most saturated orange push that we're going to get here is going to be at the whites. And this is what I really don't like when I look at this image and I push the Film Look Creator really far, is that I get really weird overcooked highlights. And with my DCTL, you can see that it always converges back to white unless you don't want it to. And this is the really fun thing. You can use this high convergence slider here to open up these whites if you want. You can see between 2 and 1, you just kind of change the shape of this curve. But if you push it even further, then you actually open up the whites. And if you want to, you can really get this wash. And this can be a really good look. And I can show you an example here where that might be exactly what you want to do, where you just want to have that warm wash over the highlights that never converges back to white. And in this case, this is as far as I would go, but you could even go further, and now you get this problem that it gets really saturated towards the whites. And then you can use this high convergence to just protect your whites from getting affected too much. And this is the amount of minute control that you get with my DCTL that you just don't get with the Film Look Creator. And there's another thing that I really want to point out about the curves in the Film Look Creator. And I'm going to get my scopes up again and activate the Film Look Creator again. And this is what we're seeing here, this kink. As you can see, the Film Look Creator really applies this split tone, but applying 2 separate curves, one for the shadows and one for the highlights. And they just meet at this pivot point at a very sharp angle. There's no kind of soft roll off. It's just a kink. And I'm just going to slightly change the pivot point so that you maybe see that a little bit better. I hope you can see it over YouTube, but you can see on this gradient, you can really see where that kink is. It's like almost like a straight line that feels too bright that goes straight through that gradient. And this is something we might want to avoid when we're creating a look, because even if it looks good on the first 10 or 20 images, at some point you're going to have an image with a gradient in it where that kink shows. And this is really something we want to avoid if we can at all. And to demonstrate you how severe this problem can be, let's have a look at Thatcher Freeman's gradient smoothness chart. and activate that film look creator. And now you can really see, depending on the gradients that you can get really sharp kinks and you can get really strange looking effects here in the gradients. Whereas if you use My DCTL, no matter how far you push this, no matter what you do with this, no matter your settings, you always get smooth gradients. And this is really important when creating looks. As I said, even if it looks good on the first 10 images, you want to avoid suddenly getting to that 11th, 112th image where something breaks because of your look. And this is the power that you get with this DCTL or any other good DCTL when it comes to split tone. You can see this as well if I activate this DCTLs. No matter what your settings are, no matter what you do, you always get smooth curves and you never get any sharp kinks. Another more creative consideration is that the split tone here in the film look creator only gives you one hue angle, and it always locks the shadow and highlight hue to each other. They're always 180 degrees apart from each other. And that is not always what you want. You might want to have more control than this. And this is exactly what you get with this DCTL. I can show you how this operates. You can enable the swatches here. And this means now you can get exact control over your highlight hue and your shadow hue separately. And this is the amount of control that you only get with good DCTLs and that you don't get with the film look creator. So let's talk about a couple of the other interesting features that we have here. One is that I don't actually, if I turn the convergence up, I can show this better. I don't actually have to do all of this subtractive. If I want my highlights to feel more neutral and don't lose the ping, don't lose the brightness, I can use this subtractive high and push this to the left. And now you can see we get the color push, but we don't lose the brightness. And the same is true for the shadows. In this case, this is automatically set to a more neutral position, but we can actually also, if I decrease the convergence and then do this additively, you can see that you can get a really soft kind of faded shadow look here. And so as you can see, you can get really creative effects by playing around with different hue angles, by playing around with different shapes for your convergence. You can get really kind of soft matte looks by having something like this. And this is just something that you can play around with a good DCTL like mine that you just can't do with the film look creator. So now I'm going to use my split tone classic here to demonstrate something else that we can do with this DCTL that the film look creator can't do. And that is that we have this neutral section around middle gray. And as you can see that both these curves converge towards middle gray, so that there's always this section around our middle exposure where the skin lives, etc. that is not affected by our split tone. And we obviously can move them pivot around, and we have pivot controls here. These are relative to middle gray in stops. And we can also adjust how wide that section is. We can make them converge relatively close to middle gray, or we can have a wider neutral section to make sure that our skin tones and things in that area are not affected that much. The last thing I want to have a look at is the difference between the classic and the custom DCTL that are both part of this bundle. The first one, the classic, is probably very familiar. It feels very similar to my free DCTL. It feels familiar to a lot of DCTLs that you might already be familiar with. It has this shape where the curve always converges to black and white. No matter what you do, you got the neutral section in the middle. And this is just a good go-to DCTL if you just want a clean split tone look without too much tweaky control that you can just rely on to give you clean results no matter what you do. And as you can see on an image like this, this has the advantage of keeping your blacks really black and your whites really white. On the other hand, we can use the custom DCTL to get really strong kind of faded film looks like this. And if we have a look at the curve, this is the convergence that I'm talking about. You can use these controls to really fine tune how your curve converges and how much of a faded look you get. And if you push this really far, it probably doesn't look very good. But as you can see, you can get these kinds of looks where your blacks feel lifted, your whites feel kind of a little bit more tinted. But as you can see, even with the custom one here, you can get very subtle looks as well. It's really up to you. This one just gives you a little bit more control, but it tends to feel softer and a little bit matter compared to the classic one, which gives you a crisper, crunchier result. And that is why I think you should buy my DCTLs. If you have the money. If not, you can obviously grab my free split tone DCTL, which is still available and which will feel very similar to the classic version of the Pro DCTLs. As always, if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out. So that's all for today. I hope you found this interesting and useful. If you want to stay up to date about new tools and videos that I release, you can subscribe if that's something you like. And otherwise, I just hope you have a good day, and I'll see you again very soon.